So I remember one time someone had told me, a manager I had, like, it doesn't matter how smart of an idea you have or how much sense you think it makes. If you can't teach it or enable it to the users that are going to be on it, or if it's like some kind of analysis, if they can't understand it and you can't explain it, you just wasted time and it's useless. At the end of the day, we are support role, we're operations, we have.
All right, everybody, welcome to this episode of the RevAmp podcast. My name is Mark Lerner. I am your host, and I'm joined today by Patrick, and really excited to hear his story. So without further ado, Patrick, why don't you introduce yourself to the folks at home, a little bit about yourself, what you do, where you come from, that kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. So thanks, Mark. Very happy to be a part of this. My name is Patrick Franciotti. I work at Ontra, which is a legal technology company. And what we really are is an AI-powered legal operating system composed of three different products that have been purpose-built to solve legal process challenges for our private capital investors and their different advisors. And here at Ontra, we were formerly called InCloud Console, and I joined the company at that time when it was about 40 people. So I was working at WeWork before, plenty of, probably spend another hour talking about that if we could. That was a great time, learned a lot from there. And then joining in this company when they're around that 40-person mark, we did not have any operations people at the company. I was actually the first hire in the go-to-market org, which is made up of maybe 5 people at that time. That wasn't a former lawyer. So I was the first ops person kind of tasked with building out that whole world, but also the first person that came from a non-legal background. So quite a different experience going from, multi-thousand, multinational company at WeWork to switching over to here, but it's kind of exactly what I was looking for. And it's been an exciting 4 years and feels like it's been 100 years, but it's been all great things and I'm, couldn't be more excited to be here.
Yeah, and I think we can all identify a little bit with the last 4 years feeling like a century. What's interesting is I was looking at your LinkedIn and I noticed that you joined the company January 2020, which is obviously, as we all know, kind of a auspicious time. So I'd love to kind of go in that direction. And obviously, depending on where you were in the country, between January and March was when the world basically turned upside down and everything shut down. And a lot of companies, I think at first thought this is the end, or, what are we going to do? Some companies it was easier for them to switch to work from home. Some companies, it was much more difficult. I think people in ops roles were in a unique position to help, support that move. So I'd love to hear a little bit about what that experience was like for you, when you started and how that all went down.
Yeah, for sure. Very interesting time. And I think here at Ontra, we were definitely in a fortuitous position where, the company financially has put themselves in a great position where, when that whole COVID world started and we had to work from home and, we saw layoffs going around in the industry, it obviously crossed my mind as someone who was there for 3 months and had really just gotten to know people and really just started barely figuring out my role. But it was very clear that the leadership of the company had confidence in where we were, did not see any concern around headcount or, the type of spending. We're still only, 45 people or so at that time. So in retrospective, it kind of helped me, I think, being someone who had to implement the entire tech stack and learn the company. And it's an industry, working with private equity companies and customers is not the easiest to understand. I had worked in finance in the past, but that was more in like a private wealth management role. So learning the ins and outs of private equity and general partners and limited partners and fundraising, that's a lot for any role to learn, whether you're at Ontra, whether you're at somebody else. So, not that COVID was a positive thing whatsoever, definitely not saying that, but it gave me a little bit more time to kind of figure out what I need to do here. And that was everything from, what tech stack do we use? What is our sales team supposed to look like? So it gave us a lot of time to do a good amount of planning. Of course, we put, hiring on pause for a little bit, try to figure that out. But our business wasn't too affected after the first real rush of like, this is what's happening now with COVID. Not that the stock market is any kind of direct correlation to our business, but the private markets, fundraising, companies looking to grow, that kind of picked up pretty quickly. And because of that, that's almost a machine that brings our business and our solutions in. So as that was going on, we actually picked up pretty quickly. And the whole remote work, was definitely new. I remember, I think I was setting up the tool outreach for us for our outbound team, and I think I did something wrong where, every day I was waking up to Slack some people in London or people in Hong Kong, like this isn't working. So the not I guess time difference isn't really a result of COVID, but the accessibility of everybody I feel like became a lot stronger. So as the only person who was doing that ops role, I really had to figure it out for everybody, which is my job, which is what I wanted to do. That's why I joined. But it was, I probably put it on myself to make it feel a little bit more urgent than it is. So it could be a little bit stressful at times when you're waking up to Slacks and, this isn't working or this is broke. But, I knew I was the one person that was there who was, kind of hired to do this and to fix this. So as much as or as accessible as I was or anybody else at the company was, we really became like a Slack heavy company, which may sound obvious, but personally, we don't really send that many emails to each other. It's mostly a Slack driven communication system, which I like, but it also makes you that very accessible person. So it had its downsides where, people are pinging you for a lot of different stuff, but at the same time, it allowed me to communicate very quickly with a lot of people. And, being the only person there, it was really my job to fix that for everybody, make sure wherever you were in the country, wherever you were sitting, that my role was there to kind of support you and help make sure you can still do your job. Because when things picked up, we had to really get back to work and figure out like, all right, this little couple month lull period is over, and we need to get back to doing all the things that we were doing.
Yeah. And like you mentioned, you said it was 40 some odd people, and 4 years later, as you said, it's something like 500 people, and your role has moved up as well. So you were the first ops role. You were there when everything kind of shut down, and it sounded like you needed to kind of help scale under these circumstances. How, as an operator, as an ops person, did you decide on, what tools, processes, and systems to empower the go-to-market team with? Like, what was the, decision kind of matrix in your mind about what to choose, when you would to use a tool and when to try to, work with what you have? Like, how was that decision-making process in your mind? And how has that changed as you've scaled?
Yeah, for sure. Great question. I think one of the main and probably more obvious and apparent um, decision-making ideas I was going through my head was what I was familiar with. So there are definitely tools that I had used that WeWork that, I kind of knew a decent amount. But, past experience does not always make sense at a new company. So I had to really figure that out and make sure I was thinking about it the correct way. One thing that was very new to here, which kind of goes back to the point around having our salespeople all being ex-lawyers for, some of the biggest law firms in the world. So something like a Salesforce or an Outreach or a Zoom Info, that was a totally foreign concept. So one thing that was very apparent to me pretty early was we needed something that was not only going to have all the bells and whistles that would get us the data we want and made it easy to use, but that second piece of the ease of use and being able to enable those tools was even more important than anything else. So I remember one time someone had told me, a manager I had, like, it doesn't matter how smart of an idea you have or how much sense you think it makes. If you can't teach it or enable it to the users that are going to be on it, or if it's like some kind of analysis, if they can't understand it and you can't explain it, you just wasted time and it's useless. At the end of the day, we are support role, we're operations. We help develop a strategy, we help drive the ops of all the different go-to-market motions. And all of that, we're companies only as good as the logos and the deals we're closing and the revenue we're making. So it's not about me. It's not about the ops roles. If the teams we're supporting can't use it, that was a huge red flag. And that would be a red flag for anybody. But I think it was even more apparent at our company, given the background of our salespeople, that not only did they not ever use these tools, they never really even heard of them because that wasn't their world up until they joined here. So luckily enough, I was able to get there at an early time where we only had 2 to 3 salespeople. So we had a very concentrated group, our little leadership group that we had of 3 or 4 people that we were all pretty hands-on in learning this. So I was able to not only provide like the technical perspective of how it's all going to work and connect, but having someone like our VP of sales and our all the sales managers on those calls to help play with it and test it out really helped out a lot, because to me that was the biggest challenge. We need to make sure people know how to use it. And there's people, no matter what your background is, you're gonna have to learn these tools. But to me, I wanted to make sure that was a very big part of the decision-making process, for all the reasons I said before, but especially given the background of our salespeople, that to me was like of the utmost importance. So there's of course like a cost component, and there's the integration pieces, trying to put everything into Salesforce. Salesforce is probably the only like no-brainer that we had when I got here. But outside of that, making sure that we can use it quickly and we can ramp people up quickly on it was probably the biggest point that I was trying to make with the team that we were deciding all these tools on.
Yeah. And ramping up from 2-3 salespeople to, let's see, you have 500 people. I'm assuming, many dozens of salespeople now, over that period of time is, there are kind of inherently challenges in the sales process that when you're smaller, you just kind of deal with on a manual basis because, you're smaller, but you kind of know at some point we're going to have to figure this out, and either with a internal solution, or, a new process, a new tool. What was like, did you have like a level of pain in like, once we've reached this level is when, okay, that's the time where we need to go looking for a solution to support it? Or was it, kind of ad hoc? Like, how did you juggle it? I'm assuming you had a lot of stuff coming at you.
Yeah, I think at least from a tech stack perspective first, I think I was lucky enough, or our company was lucky enough, where we kind of had, and I don't want to call it a green light, but they kind of trusted us to say, and this is true. And one thing I would say about the company as a whole, there's a lot of trust and autonomy given to different members of different teams. We hired you to do what you do, and we're going to trust you to go do that. We'll support you in any way that you need it. But like that's the company kind of philosophy, or at least part of it. And that really resonates with me. So when I got there, these people, these teammates and colleagues that I had, they hadn't used these tools before. So it was very much, Patrick, we're relying on you. Like we're going to give input and support, but we wanted to go get these tools. And the one, I don't want to call it was an urgent need, but I think we hired sales ops and myself pretty early, which is really helpful. And I think our VP of sales, who's now our CRO, kind of realized that and wanted to make sure we had someone in place to do this before we scaled. And part of that came with the tech stack. We knew that we need to do this sooner rather than later, because as you get all these people and you're scaling too quickly, it takes a lot to catch up in terms of infrastructure. By the time you get these tools set up, your process is going to change. One of the biggest differences for us was not just headcount changes, because we grew a tremendous amount in 2021. It's kind of like our huge year of headcount growth. We also we added more products that we were selling. We had a consumption-based product that's been the company's kind of cornerstone of revenue since it was founded and what it was founded on. But since then, we have introduced a second product that's a SaaS product, and now a third product that's another SaaS product. So not only were we adding headcount and we were expanding regions and the company was getting bigger as a whole, we were also introducing new solutions to the market, which required like, all right, we know what the product does. All those typical questions you would ask. Who are the ICPs? How are we going to sell it? How do we message it? That was all brand new for everybody at the company. So that was a kind of a dual challenge that we faced, was we're adding more people, but as they're all joining, this other product is gaining some steam. It's now becoming more prominent in the market. And because of the multi-product dynamic and also the way those products are sold, consumption versus typical SaaS model, made it even more challenging to kind of corral all that in one place. So one of the biggest things that I've probably learned since being here is that, and I think it's just for an ops role or best practice in my mind, is it's very challenging. Outside of prioritization, to me, it's probably the most challenging thing to do, because you get, like you said, you get all these requests from all these different places, which is great. That's our job, and that's always going to be a challenge. The other piece was, how do you build something that's going to satisfy the current needs and strategy of the company, but also be set up for the future changes that are going to come sooner or later, whether that's from a new product or whether that's from a change of responsibility, whatever that may be. You have to both build something, and whether that's a process, whether that's technical, to get you the answers and the data and the results that you need now, but also be in a position where 1 year from now, our CRM or the way our sales team sells is not totally obsolete and just not sufficient. So that is always something you really have to juggle. And, sometimes there's, I've definitely made plenty of wrong decisions here when I thought, oh, let's build this or let's do it this way. 6 months later, all right, we need to change that. But I think that's totally fine when you're a growing company and you're kind of figuring these things out. We have a lot of smart people spending a lot of time on it. We had our best thoughts on some of these, but the most important part is when it's not working, you pivot. When it is working, you accelerate. So that was kind of our mantra around it, and kind of like our North Star was we had some kind of metric where we knew, if this drops below this, like now it's time to rethink it. If we see this going up, now it's time to really put our foot in the gas and keep going. So that was kind of the way we looked at the way we're scaling, both from an infrastructure and process standpoint. And, it's never perfect. Like all the ideas we had, my current boss says this to me all the time, whatever hypothesis you have in the beginning, it's probably going to be wrong 100% of the time. It's impossible to predict it and get it right. If it was that easy, we'd be a multi-trillion-dollar company and so would everybody else. Obviously not the reality. So you just have to put your best foot forward and make the best assumptions and hypothesis that you can. And then when you kind of measure that and have a really strong view into it and be almost like maniacal about measuring it, you can understand pretty quickly whether or not it's working or not, and what changes you need to make to kind of support whatever direction the company's going in.
So you had actual, metrics or indicator that you looked at that would say, this is working, let's double down, or this is not working, we have to scrap it.
Yeah, and usually those would be our OKRs. So our company really pushes, objectives and key results, which as an ops person, I absolutely love, because you can get asked a million different things. But when you think about prioritization, like where do I spend my time? First place I always look and my team looks is what are our OKRs? Those are the metrics that our company leadership has come up with that have been distilled across the organization. We all know that is our North Star. Those are the numbers and goals that we need to be accomplishing. One, we shouldn't really be spending too much time outside of those, but at the end of the quarter, that's what we're going to look at. We're going to see, did we hit these goals? Did we not? And there's, we've had plenty of decks and slides we put together. And one of the questions we would ask ourselves is, where's there a chance to accelerate? And one of the other questions was, what's something that's not working that we need to pivot on? And this is something that's shared across the company. So we've been very transparent about, which I think is really helpful, what's working and what's not. And we constantly kind of say that, like, it's okay if something's not working. Well, it's not okay. We want to change it, but like, it's going to happen. And like, not everyone doesn't need to freak out if something isn't going the way we planned it. We just need to put our heads back together and figure out what do we need to do differently in order to change that. So those OKRs are, I've always used the term North Stars. Like that's where we look. That's what we're getting measured on. There's other stuff that's important, the things that you have to do, but the OKRs were really what we're telling us. Is this working? Is this not? And if it's not, we need to change something to make sure it starts working.
It's amazing. It sounds like, this kind of being adaptive and agile is built into the company DNA, which is really a unique thing in the people I've talked to. So it's really nice to hear. It's great that you kind of built that into everything you did. How did the fluctuations or changes in the external market or environment factor into that? So that may not necessarily have changed, affected your internal OKRs, but did you have some sort of like finger in the wind to know which way the wind is blowing and be able to like say, okay, well, we need to quickly shift our strategy in order to meet this new need?
Yeah, there absolutely is. So I remember early when I joined our CFO, who's now our COO, kind of pointed this out to us and explained this to our team of how like we are part of a cyclical industry and business. We are driven off fundraising, private equity firms raising funds. That is really kind of like one of our biggest, if not the biggest trigger of how we get involved to support these different companies. So there's a period of time there in the last couple of years where that wasn't the private markets industry was not very active. There weren't a lot of funds being raised. Capital wasn't being allocated to different investments. And that proved to be a challenge to us. And because of that, and not only because of that, it's part of the reason why we started offering these other software solutions. Our main business, contract automation, the consumption-based model, is very much driven off that fundraising and really document processing. And we know that that's cyclical and it's going to change over the years. Like there's going to be downturns. There's going to be really accelerated periods of time where we're really killing it. But we obviously knew as a company that we can't be completely reliant on that. So that's what's kind of, on top of just being more than a one product company, led us to kind of building these other software products, which are not tied as much to macro level impact. So, and it's not something that we weren't aware of. We've seen this before in the last however many years the company's been around. It happens at different points in time. So we really try to position ourselves not only to have other products that would kind of bypass almost or still be able to support us in those different times, but also just have a wider variety of offerings for the customers that we choose. We have a very strong customer base on our first product, the contract automation piece. So we put ourselves in a really good position to not only offer more products to more people, but also be able to cross-sell our new products to our existing customers. We have a very strong collection of some of the most important and impactful private equity firms in the world. So using those, we have a really easy, or ideally easy, a really strong potential to start selling them our other software products, which again is a little bit different than our existing product, but puts us in a great position to offer this entire legal operating system.
Super interesting. I wanted to kind of pivot back a little bit to your decision rubric around tooling and tech stack. You're kind of in this unique position, I think, amongst some of the folks in our world, is that your internal user, the sales reps, are generally not from within, or I guess early on, generally not within the tech world, right? They were former legal folks. And so they weren't opinionated necessarily about we need this, we need that, and they didn't know maybe the lingo of it and all this. So in your kind of weighting of decisions, where do you place kind of the features of the product as opposed to the usability, ease of use that you talked about? Like, how do you kind of make that decision?
For tools, I would say for the technical side of things, I've always, and maybe this is a little bit too ambitious of me and our team, but I've always taken the approach is like, we will figure that out. Like the technical aspect of it, the setup, the integrations, all the back-end stuff, that should never be a reason why we don't get a tool. Like, of course, it needs to do kind of like the table stakes, bare minimum things that we're looking for. But we need to take the approach like that tool's not for us. Salesforce is not for us. That's for the company. That's for sales management. That's for all different types of teams that use it. So we have to make sure it works no matter what. So that shouldn't be a reason that we ever think we shouldn't get something. We recently decided on on Deal Hub, obviously. So when we were looking through all these different tools, we said to ourselves, like, well, the technical side, like we'll get that. We're not worried about that. What we need to worry about are these other things. So the ease of use is always, I would say, almost number one, assuming you meet these like minimum requirements across these other categories. But the other piece is probably dependent on like what the output of the tool is that we're looking. So one of the examples I'll use Deal Hub as the use case here. We had really no quote to cash infrastructure set up at all. So at the bare minimum, we knew that the three things that were going to be super important to us were approvals. Well, it was a huge piece. We've had this world of offering bespoke contracts, a little customized all over the place. We still have our process set up. It's pretty manual. But the approval piece was probably the number one aspect. Kind of got brought to us as a team saying, hey, we need approvals in place to kind of get this sorted out. The other piece, of course, was ease of use. Like how easy is it for our team to be going to use this? So the guided selling piece of Deal Hub was a huge, huge plus, and kind of like what we kept going back to when we were comparing these tools is like, that's what we need. We need someone to go on the tool and just start clicking questions and answers and get them in their order form and create that process. And the last part would be the output that we're looking for. We use a different tool for billing and invoicing. So some of these tools that we looked at, they really focused on, well, we have all this reporting and we have all this invoicing capability. That wasn't our need for this tool. Our need was to get something our sales team could use and to automate as much as we can the quote to cash process. And then also maintain the right data integrity and creating the right data inside of Salesforce or Deal Hub, whichever tool you want to look at. But something like billing or showing us all these fancy charts and stuff, like that wasn't a huge need for us. So I think the tool also depends on like what you're trying to get out of it. So for Deal Hub, like those were our kind of reasons. And some tools that like for outbound tools, we looked at outreach, we looked at SalesLoft. They're pretty similar. So like you start looking at other things like cost or how quickly you may be able to implement it. But for Deal Hub specifically, that was like we looked at an Ontra specific use case because there's plenty of tools out there. We looked at Salesforce. We looked at Subscribe. There are a few different tools that all offered a different mix of things, but based on our need, that guided selling, that automation, that data integrity, Deal Hub was clearly like our number one choice pretty early on in the process.
That's awesome to hear. Yeah, so as we kind of head towards the end of the chat here, I want to look forward a little bit. We're kind of in the early stages of 2024. Obviously the last few years have been tumultuous, right? We had COVID, then we had post-COVID, and the macro environment got weird and funding dried up, and there are a bunch of companies that struggled. We had AI, explode into the world. So it's hard to feel like the ground beneath us is very stable. But from kind of your perspective, how are you looking at this coming year, 2024, in terms of your role as supporting the growth of the company, operationally? What are some of the challenges and kind of the things that you're looking at, working on?
Yeah. So I think right now, we recently, just this year, it's a timely question, pivoted our sales strategy and responsibilities a little bit. So historically, when I joined, we started like, all right, we have 100 accounts, 5 people, you're all going to get 20 accounts. Like that was our territory restructuring at the time. Then we started implementing, all right, let's have sellers cover specific tiers of accounts. The way we kind of gauge the revenue potential of different accounts. And then now we're at a place where we're doing the tiering. Obviously, we want our best sellers across the most valuable accounts, but we've also switched to a new versus growth sales dynamic. So we have a sales team focused on totally net new sales, and we have a sales team focused on expanding our existing customers with new products. Our company vision right now, I would say, is really focusing on that legal operating system across these 3 products that we offer. So this shift in sales strategy, it also had an impact on some of our customer success teams and how they manage customers and how they interact with them. Is a brand new thing that we've been working on from the end of last year, the second half of last year, kind of coming to fruition at the beginning of this year. So of course that requires all these territory changes, all the new goals and, quotas, all the things that come with those kind of large changes. But probably the biggest shift, I don't want to call it a shift, but a shift that's been more apparent recently is the dynamic between our customer success teams and our growth sellers and our new sellers. We've always had, a strong relationship between the two, but it's even more apparent now of how much those 2 teams need to be in lockstep in order to achieve whatever goals that we have. We really want to become this legal operating system for all the private equity companies, for the private markets. And in order to do so, we need to sell more products to our existing customers, and we need to sell new products to people who don't use us already. So we believe that having this new sales structure could really support that. We have but a maturing partnerships department we expect to be a huge part of our revenue growth and the company's growth. So given all those, we've been lucky enough, again, I think, to get a few different areas where we're hiring for on our team, whether it's on the sales ops team or the customer operations team. We're definitely investing in our ops department to help make sure we can support this scale, this growth, and the changing of responsibilities. So really building out the right process that's going to cross the customer success teams, or the new sales, the growth sales, and the customer success teams. It kind of gets passed along in that way. Someone who doesn't use us, we end up closing them. Eventually, they'll get to the growth team. At that point, they'll also get to the customer success team. So it's kind of like this assembly line of how we manage and take a customer through their journey with us. So that customer journey piece is really how we're trying to make sure we're doing correctly, but also being able to make sure they see the value of our products and want to commit to Ontra across all the solutions that we offer.
Super interesting. Patrick, thank you so much for joining us today. It was really, really fascinating to get a view into kind of your world and your experience. Before we say goodbye, let the folks at home know how they could maybe follow you on the social or learn more about Ontra, whatever. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I probably should be a little bit more active on like social media stuff or like LinkedIn. My LinkedIn name is Patrick Franciotti, but I think probably more beneficial is as much as this was me telling my story, like I'm lucky to be here because I work for Ontra, which I think is a fantastic company, and we are hiring across a lot of roles. So rather than reaching me, I would suggest reaching out to Ontra, and Ontra.ai is our website, and you can learn more about what we do, the open roles, and you kind of just familiarize yourself with the solutions that we offer and our place in the market.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Patrick.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. I really appreciate it.